Alrighty, welcome to another episode of I Guess I'll Do It with Pat House. Today I have a very special guest. We've been friends for a long time. We both started here in Philadelphia. He's hilarious. He's very, very talented and also extremely handsome. Today I have Blake Wexler. Blake, thank you for being here.
Pat, thank you. A little behind the scenes. Pat just screwed up my name on the podcast, and we cut that out. We also cut out me telling the producer how to record his own podcast, all the while my microphone wasn't plugged in. So this chaos, this is my fault, Pat. And as a friend, as your friend of what, like 15 years almost? 14 years? Yeah, you deserve better.
It's a shame. This was the final nail in the coffin here. But dude, thank you for being here. So before we get started, now you started comedy very young. So what age did you do your very first set?
My first set was I was 15 years old after, and this is going to be a fun talk because we have so much overlap, but
Absolutely.
I was 15. You started very young as well. I started younger, which means I am a better comic. And but yes, I started when I was 15 because of Paul Solari's mainline comedy night class.
Yep, that's exactly what I'm getting at. Because so I wanted to know your age for a specific reason for this intro story I'm going to tell now. I started at 19, and I was definitely like the youngest person out doing comedy in Philly for a while. Like, and not that I had any sort of success, but I was doing a bunch of open mics and a couple, paid bar gigs here and there, but I was still 19, just turned 20. I'm still young. I'm still a kid. And then I got wind that there was a 15-year-old doing stand-up, and I was like, who the fuck is this guy? I felt like someone out there was stealing my thunder because I was the youngest. I was supposed to be like the newest, freshest faced, and then you came on the scene, and then we immediately became friends. And I think we met, I could be wrong, I'm really not 100% on this, but I think you and I met at Milk Boy in Ardmore.
Yes.
It would do shows there. Richard Leese used to do shows there. Who
Richie Lala, excuse you.
Yes. Who also ran comedy at Flappers in Burbank, but he's from here. Mm-hmm. And I believe that's where I met you because I was like freshly 20 and you were still in high school because you were talking about it.
Yeah, and also I was so young, I could only perform at places called Milk Boy.
Yeah, the irony is actually pretty impressive. I mean,
it is.
You are a boy, and Milk is just that's a weird name.
It is off-putting, where milk, you shouldn't have the word boy generally, I think, in any name, of a business, especially, but Milk Boy is definitely very, very odd. It was a fun place, though.
Yeah, it was. They had really good shows there. I remember, I don't know if it was monthly or bi-monthly, but I remember, now granted, I was also brand new, so I was doing dog shit material, but I mean, I remember all the crowds being good.
Yeah, it is funny too, because when you're that young, like, because you kind of alluded to this, I guess, where I heard that you were young as well, and I'm like, because I couldn't be funny or have good material, all I had was to be the youngest. You know what I mean? Like that was my angle, is just youth.
Well, yeah. Well, you didn't really have an option either. I mean, you just were 15, so right. I mean, it's an angle, but it's also what life gave you at the time. You know what I mean? Doesn't make sense what life gave you, but you know what I mean.
No, I know exactly. And it was hard at that age where, like, because I mean, I was joking about the Milk Boy thing, but there is truth to that, in that, being under the age of 21 or even like, under the age of 18, it could be tough to find venues to perform in. So a coffee shop was like, the accessibility there was much easier than, if I was to perform in a bar or something, so I would actually have, go ahead.
Did you have any issues with that? Like, did you try to reach out to Helium or the Laugh House when you were 15?
Yes. So I think Helium may have been 2 years later or a year later. So the deal, honestly, that I would do is that, because, performing, I couldn't drive, so my mom would have to come to me. No, but I could take public transit, conceivably. I wouldn't. But yeah, no, you could do that. But my mom would have to come to gigs with me, like not only as like a driver, but, I would email or call these places being like, hey, I'm 15. There's an open mic tonight. Like, can I come in? And they're like, oh, it's only 21 and over. I'm like, what if I bring a guardian? And then most places were cool with that, which is odd. But yeah, my mom, like, and they weren't good shows when you started. Like, it's not like, my mom was taking me to a Saturday night, show at Helium Comedy Club with a packed, incredible audience. It was like Bar Noir
Oh God,
at like
yeah.
2 a.m.,
Oh
and it
man.
was bad shows.
Also, you were in school. You were in high school, and Bar Noir was an open mic on Mondays. So that's
Correct.
that's inconvenient for you.
Also, yeah, and
Yeah.
I wasn't, I wouldn't get a priority slot either, nor should I, because like I wasn't an experienced comic, so they would put you on at like 1:30, in the morning. So yeah, that was a tough. You can't really judge your material at any age at that time of of morning. But yeah.
What was your like so you started crazy young, which is awesome, because I think Chappelle was 14, Tom Rhodes was
Right.
17. I love, it's such a weird thing to actually dive into when you're that young. So what got you actually into stand up when you were, still a kid?
So this is a weird thing, but like my mom was, or like my parents were trying to find like a life skill for me. So they were like, hey, like you should, learn how to play golf or tennis, or, something that like you can do into your 40s. Cause like, I wasn't really doing, like, what was I going to do with my life? And I really like stand up, and I always wanted to do stand up because I would watch like, the premium blends on Comedy Central, the old half hours. And then all of a sudden, like there was a mainline school night or whatever, which was basically, I guess night classes for adults, it was supposed to be. So I saw a stand-up comedy class, and I was like, this is my activity. This is my life skill. I want to like try stand-up. And that's kind of how it started.
That's awesome. I actually went to that class as well, but I just went for one session because it was Paul's class, local Philly comic who's been doing comedy for, forever. He was doing stuff back in the 70s and 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And me and David James went to one class, but we'd already been doing stand-up for a while. And
Right.
we had to get up in front of the class and do stand-up. And David and I actually had like really good sets in front of the class. And then Paul Solari was like, well, you guys are already been doing stand-up for like a year, so you don't have to come back. So we never did, but we both showed up one time.
That is such like a comedian's business acumen, where he could have made money off you guys. Like, just don't come back.
I know. Well,
Just
he
you're
even
too funny.
he's like, this is for people that have never even been on stage one time. And he's like, you guys are already doing open mics and like, at Helium and in the Laugh House. He's like, don't even bother. So we didn't.
Yeah.
But then we still did some gigs for him in later years at like VFW
Bonkers.
halls and Bonkers. Where was that?
Bonkers Comedy Club. That's what he would call.
That's
so he
right.
like
That's
it would be
right.
one-nighters. In Springfield, I think, was where one of the bars were.
Yes,
I don't know
that's
where
I first
be.
met John Kensel and the Wid, I think, which is odd because I lived in Springfield and the show was 5 minutes from my home.
So funny.
So who were your favorite comics when you were, 12 and 13?
It was Lewis Black was one of my favorites. Which
big fan of him at the time.
Of course, yeah, and I still love Lewis Black, and
as do I.
Right, and he. It is funny where like comics, when you first start, often your style it's not your voice yet, because you don't know what your voice is on stage, or when you were our age too, like you don't even know who the hell you are as a person. So I have an old clip. I don't know. I have it somewhere where my second show, like I had Lewis Black, like his tone on stage, which is really weird coming from like a 16-year-old growing up in a upper middle class area, where it's like, why is he so angry? And it wasn't, about George Bush or, politics. I was complaining about like, these SATs, like it was just not, appropriate. The tone was not appropriate. So
yeah, he's like a 60-year-old man venting about society and the state of America, and then you're a 16-year-old kid just fucking doing his style, talking about homework.
Yeah. It didn't make any sense. It made no sense. Like my act made no sense whatsoever. So yeah, Lewis Black was one of my favorites for sure. Dave Chappelle also. And then Patrice O'Neal, I became a big fan of, and Bill Burr. Like there were just so many, great comics that were those Comedy Central half hours. By the way, I used to download them. I think my first iPod, like those took up all the memory in my iPod, just watching those on the iPod screen or whatever.
See, I love shit like that because I remember buying some of those too. But I think the Comedy Central Presents like half-hour series was predominantly airing when I was in high school, and like I
Mhm.
couldn't get enough. I would watch them every
Yeah.
single day. I had people's acts memorized, and they're really fun to go back and watch now. Like I haven't in a while, but it's so cool to go back and see comedians like even like a Wanda Sykes or like a Jim Gaffigan, people who are
Mhm.
crazy successful and famous now. Like it's their first half hour of stand up, and it's like you can just see how much they progressed and how they found their voice even after their first special. They're really
Yeah,
really
yeah.
cool to go back and watch.
You know what's funny too, because I think I've watched some of that, and in my mind, you want to go back and see it, and the goal for me would be like, oh, when they were at this point, like like in my like where I'm at in my career, they were not nearly as good as they are now. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you can see so much room for growth, which is part of it, but I think I love these comics so much. Like even their material from 20 years ago to me is still like, wow, God, like top of the mountain. You know what I mean? Like I can't even discern the fact that they hadn't progressed yet to where they are now.
That's I'm going to tag on to that. So I
Yeah.
love Ted Alexandro, and I had him on the podcast
Hmm.
a couple months ago, and I like worshipped him. He came to Helium when the club first opened. I went to all 6 shows, and
Yeah.
we were talking about his Comedy Central Presents. He was only 6 years in when he got that. I thought he was like
Unbelievable.
12 or 15. Like he got his Comedy Central half hour just 6 years into his career. And he told me that when I was 16 years into mine. And I'm like, what the fuck? My whole like perception of comedy was completely thrown off because I thought he was way, way, way more in the game by that point.
Yeah, I don't know what like, and I'm trying to think like Paul F. Tompkins and,
Another Philly
Todd
guy.
Glass. Yeah, yeah. There's so many back then that were just so good. I do wonder, I always like looking at those lists, like I mean, I'm not gonna watch all of them, but you have HBO and they have all the old specials on there. I like to look for names where I don't know who they are. Because it's always really famous, successful comics. And it's interesting to me the idea of, oh, here's a name of someone who got this massive career thing. And now where are they for whatever reason?
Yeah, it's fun to like try to find them on social media and stuff too. And then
Yeah.
sometimes they're just not found. Other times they're just like they just stop doing comedy and they just live normal lives off the map.
Right, right. It's like, oh, this person joined the alt-right movement. Okay, I see why their career didn't move anywhere.
Do you remember any of your first jokes from your very first set or your first couple sets? Like, do you remember any?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I think I remember all of them. Like in sometimes I wake up screaming at night because
Yeah.
I picture myself doing them. But
Oh,
yeah, the first set was my first set was after that class. Like
yeah.
so.
And I forgot to ask you. The whole premise of this podcast is about your first set. Essentially, we talk all things comedy, but
Of course.
specifically like where your first set was. I didn't even ask you that yet. So tell me about the very first time you did stand up.
No. It's funny because we know each other so well. It's like it just seems like an odd thing to ask,
Exactly.
because But yeah, it was after the best part about those comedy classes, in my opinion, is that it does just force you to get on stage. Because there's only so much you can learn in a stand-up comedy class, but it was a very nurturing audience. They were all like great, but the thing is, like, I was still 15, so my friends couldn't come because it was a bar. So it was my mom and my sister came, and I didn't do well. A lot of people, their first set, they do great, and then it like your next couple sets don't go well often. I found.
No,
But
that's seemed in a lot of the people I've talked to, that's kind of been the case, and my case as well.
yeah,
First two were great,
yeah.
the next 10 were horrible.
Which makes sense, because if your first one's bad, you'd be like, oh, fuck this. You know what I mean? And then, if it goes really well, you're getting a little cocky and you go on stage next and it doesn't, like reality hits. But yeah, I didn't do well. I think I did like 3.5 minutes. And one of my jokes was, I am halfway. I'm half. God, the wording on this, it's so nuanced. I really want to nail it. I am halfway through puberty, which means I'm lying somewhere between small penis and slightly larger small penis, was, I think, my opener. And that was the reaction that it got.
That was very funny. I was just letting you finish.
Thank you, thank you. No, that was it. Yeah, that was one of them. And then I think like I had a joke about the SATs, and this one I'm not as proud of. But this one was like SATs should they're so hard it should stand for shitting a tiger was the line.
Dude, I remember
Because
that. I remember that joke. That's so. I haven't heard you say it in God knows how long, but I absolutely remember that one.
well, Pat, it's my closer. I've been closing with it for the past few years. But yeah, those were the jokes because I mean that was like my point of view where I don't know. I think it was just more the novelty of watching a child trying to do stand up, but that was the first place, yeah, that I ever did it.
All right. So if the first one didn't go well, when was your first good set that you enjoyed, that you had fun with and thought it went well?
So that was at Rascals in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, where you and I have done tons of shows there
Dude, they
together.
were very, very good to me, man. Chris over there would give me guest sets and let me host all the time. Like they were very, very good to me there when I was very young. And you know, you always remember shit like that.
Oh
Had
my God,
a lot of good
100%.
memories in that room.
Dude, you know what's funny too is you always remember the people that you started out with, many of which haven't done stand up in 14 years, but I remember some of the names of the stand ups that we started with as if they were, you know, like Daniel Tosh or whatever. It's like, hey, do you remember, you know, I'm trying to think of an example that like wouldn't be offensive, but like, yeah, like all the, like, remember Vince Cummings? You know, like just, it's all these like people that you, you just, they seem like famous to you.
And it's still new and exciting, and you're making friends, and you're all in this endeavor together. So it's almost like grade school in a way. It's like meeting you and making your friends in kindergarten. You know, it's kind of the same thing.
Right. I remember following Lawrence Mullaney after a hot set at the Northeast. But yeah, that show was great. That's where I met Pat Barker actually for the first time, and he crushed. He's a guy, like, he's always done. You know, he's just such a likable comic and so funny. And I went up. And that one I like murdered because I had like this weird swagger. Not swagger. It was like a confidence of after the first joke landed. I think it was almost. Yeah.
You definitely have like a sass to your walk on stage.
Yeah, I do. Thank you. I think part of the sass was also the fact that I was wearing a Seattle Supersonics warm-up full outfit was how I dressed. So I think that was part of it where, you know, if something bad happened, I could have just torn away my pants to reveal shorts and run out of there. But it went great. Yeah, it was really, really fun because the first one I loved enough, even though I bombed, to do stand-up again. And then that second one was like, oh, this is what it's like to do well, you know, like, and if I liked it before when I got nothing, like, this is how much I like it now when it's actually okay.
So after that first show that didn't go well, when did you get on stage again? Did you wait a while or did you dive right back in? Because some people like me, I went to the Laugh House again the next week because I didn't know of any other stage time, but I've had some people on the podcast who like got on stage as soon as they could. And then other people who like just took a break for 8 months after just trying stand up one time.
Right. That is funny. I wanted to do it like that night again. You know, like I wanted to do it as soon as possible, but there were so many mechanics at that age to get stage time. Because like the next day, dude, I think at one point I may have taken the CD of that set and like mailed it to Gotham.
Dude,
I'm not. I want to say I'm exaggerating just because I'm like beat red right now with embarrassment, but there is a really good chance that I took a video of my first set and sent it to Gotham so I could do stand up there with that. Which is sick in it, which is just not how comedy works. If anyone,
here's what I'm going to say about that. That is so violently uncomfortable.
I know.
And I can't point fingers because I did something very similar. That's why I can't make fun. I haven't even thought of this memory in 15 years, but I did a show, could have been at Rascals. I'm like not even a year in. I have like 8 minutes of stand up, and honestly, maybe 5 of it is halfway passable. And I mailed it to the New York City Comedy Festival. And
Amazing.
I can't even imagine. Well, hopefully they didn't even watch it, but I mean, about 2 or 3 years after that, I realized, like, once I got a little better and learned more, was more experienced, I realized just how dumb and embarrassing that was.
It's it's so crazy. And that is such a funny shift in thinking where now, like all we want is just look at the tape, like you're going to like it. Just look at the tape that I send you. But now back then it's like, good God, please do not look at that tape. Please, under no circumstance, look at what I do on stage. Cause it was, yeah, but that's also hustle. I mean, you've always been really like, ambitious. I think that's both of us where, you want it to keep moving along. But I think in that case, we just weren't ready. It was comically early.
Do you still have your old like DVDs and stuff?
I do. It's fun. I have a hard drive like somewhere, in my apartment that has all this stuff on it. So, when I get back to LA, I want to like digitize it just because, it's a thing that you want to release when, after you get your first special or something or whatever, it's like a treasure.
Oh, absolutely. Well, years ago,
Yeah.
I did a show in Philly called In the Beginning, and I had a handful of comics like show videos of a very, very, very early set in their career and like roast themselves along the way. It was a lot of fun. Chip did it.
That's great.
Chip did it. I had Carolyn Busa. Dennis Horan did it. And I think Todd Glass was in that video.
Oh, funny.
Yeah, I should do that show again. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's a great idea for a show.
So I remember you were, you and I became friends. We're both still young. And then you went to Emerson in Boston, which is like legendary for a million comedians. I mean,
Right.
Leno, Stephen Wright, Bill Burr, Jesus Christ, Dennis Leary went there.
It's crazy. Yeah, like Dan Levy, Jen Kirkman, Harris Whittles, rest in peace, went there.
Henry
Eliza
Winkler, the Fonz went there.
Yep, the Fonz went there. You already said Dennis Leary. Yeah, there's just so Stephen Wright, so many comics.
What was now? Were you in a comedy group up there, or like were you doing shit? I don't know how to phrase this, but I know a ton of stand-ups went there, and I know that Emerson actually you can get a bachelor degree in comedy there. The only place in the world where you can actually get that degree. So what was your involvement in comedy in college? Because at that point, I mean, I started when I was a sophomore in college, but you are a freshman in college and you've already been doing it 3 or 4 years. So you already have some like a skill set there.
Yeah, I had like my stage legs, but I didn't have what's
experience.
It called?
Life experience.
Right. Yes, I didn't have a how do you say point of view. But I knew like how to get spots, like I knew like, oh, you hang out, you be a human being, you do your best material on like, the shows with a good audience, you try out stuff at open mics, just like the small mechanics of being a stand-up that like you kind of pick up like only from doing it. So when I got there, Emerson's a very weird school in that there's no sports. So where like the athletes would be cool at like a regular school, like they would be like the like quote unquote, I guess, like celebrities on campus. At Emerson, it was like the comedy troops, which is like so lame. But there were a bunch of sketch groups and improv groups that like, all those like famous comics who went to Emerson that we just mentioned that they partook in. But I was such a stand-up and already even at that age looked down on other mediums of comedy that I refused to join them, which honestly in hindsight I wish I did join them. Like they looked really fun, they did like really funny stuff, but I was so stubborn. So there was actually a stand-up group there at the college, and I kind of took that over. And it was, I mean, it's a world where it was like comedy, heaven. It was crazy for someone that age, where you would take an elevator down from your dorm, like the 7th floor, to the basement of this Emerson dorm. And in the basement, there was this state-of-the-art black box theater that was packed with like 200 people with the exact same life experiences that you had, which I never had because I would always perform to adults, and obviously bad habits could be built where like, oh, like you talk about college too much and then you get in front of a real audience and they're like, what the hell is this person talking about? But it was really, really fun. So, and we would be able to do those shows like twice a week. Like we're almost spoiled with it. It was great.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, since the Emerson is so like comedy oriented, or I guess like, I don't know, theater entertainment. What kind of college is it? Is there a way like does it have like a?
I guess it would be like a
arts?
basic. Yeah, like a communication liberal arts school, performing arts school, and yeah, I mean, like everybody who goes in there, like they either major in writing, they major in theater, or like some communication based thing. So but one good part about that is that, like, one of the reasons why I wanted to go there, obviously all the stand-ups that went there, but it being in Boston as well, because of the scene there, that, you know, it was right in the city. So I would do a set at my college, but then I would go do the Comedy Studio or the Comedy Vault or all these like cool Boston venues.
Yeah, Boston has like a weird scene. I remember like being, you know, you and I are both from Philly, obviously,
Yeah.
but Boston just seemed like a tough nut to crack. It just seems like Boston only booked Boston.
Yes, and I
Yeah,
think
no,
that was for two reasons. Like, where one is that there was really only one club at the time called the Comedy Connection that
Yep.
would have like out of town headliners. But I think the other reason is that so many like headliners, you know, like who just never left Boston, or maybe they left and came back, like live there, who drew big audiences and would still kill. So I think the thought was, why would we pay some out of towner to come in here when we could just get three of these guys that our audiences love and we can just, you know, put them up. So I think that was a part of it too. It was very like insular.
Yes, it
You know
was.
what I
That's
mean?
the exact word I was going to use. But because I
Yeah.
remember, like, you know, I would do shows in Jersey. I would go to New York City sometimes, and I did stuff, you know,
Mhm.
across Pennsylvania and Baltimore. And I wanted to like do some shows in Boston, but it just seemed like it was never even an option to try to do a club up there. But I did do the Boston Comedy Festival twice. First
Mhm.
time I ate a shit sandwich so bad, I was mortified. This set was so bad that Mary Radzinski and I still talk about it. Like, she'll still remind me of it because she was there, and she just
Right.
saw me just fucking eat it and get no laughs in an 8-minute set. And then I did the festival again a couple years later and had a much better set.
Great. Great.
But
Yeah, it's tough because those shows also would be in the dumbest places. Like, I know at one point, you know, like they were actually in comedy clubs, but then they moved them to like a Hard Rock Cafe or some like stupid place to have
yeah,
a show. And
the
it's
first
already hard.
the first time I did it,
You know?
it was at the Davis Square Theater, which is in Somerville,
Mhm.
Massachusetts, but it was like a black box theater, and it was like a great setup, but I ate it.
Of course.
And the second time I went back to Boston for the festival, it was at like a rock club bar, and it was like a
Yeah.
horrible setup, but the show was way, way, way better.
Well, Pat, I've always said you're the Green Day of stand up, and I've
Oh,
always
I
meant
mean,
that as a compliment.
I'll take that long view opinion of yours, and
Thank you. But yeah, no, it was an interesting scene too, because like I guess there were different, and I think this is happening, like this happens as a comedy scene matures, you know, where like Philly, I think Helium really kind of turned Philly into like a grown up scene.
oh god, no
You know what I
question.
mean?
I mean, no
Yeah.
question. For those of you listening, the Laugh House was a club in Philly for a long time. We just had the one club, well, and some smaller B rooms in the suburbs. But when Helium Comedy Club came to Philly, things changed because the locals had more stage time, and we were getting different names. Like, we never had like Patrice or Greg Giraldo or Dave Attell or, you know, Maria Bamford and those names come to
Right.
town until Helium opened.
God, dude, I remember there was a show, it was Christian Finnegan was like
He was just on 2 weeks ago. I just had him 2 weeks ago
Yes.
on the podcast.
Yes, who was always really, really. I mean, he won't remember who I am because I met him when I was so young. And that's the only reason why I'm very memorable. Otherwise, but he was so funny, and Mulaney was middling for him, John Mulaney, and then like David James was like opening. So like to your point, it's a really cool, like, to have Helium there. Not only was there great like opportunities for us like as stand-ups to strive to, you know, where it's like, oh, I could host there someday, you know what I mean, where you were also seeing the best comics in person, where before, you know, like you can learn a lot from your peers, but it's so important to see in person, like, oh, that's how good you have to be to get to their point in their career, you know. And
Yeah.
Helium brought that.
Yeah, and I worked there for years too, so I was like learning stuff during the day about the business and just picking up knowledge left and right every single day. And then after work, I would hang at the shows at night, and it was just the fucking coolest experience to me as a stand-up fan who absolutely loves live stand-up comedy to just see it every single night. and to like work in it during the day. Like I dove in head first in the deep end and I couldn't get enough.
Yeah, dude, that's a thing we've always had in common too, is that I don't understand stand-ups who don't like watching comedy, you know? And it does get a little more difficult the longer you do it, where there are certain shows where like, you know, living in LA, I'm so spoiled where like I mean, obviously I get to do these great shows, but I get to, you know, slide onto these shows with great, like these amazing comics, but sometimes I'll leave early, you know, where like when I was a kid, I would never, it's like, you know, there's some like bigger name on the show and I'm like, oh my God, you got to see them in person. Not only that, you got to be on a show with them. But I mean, I think more than almost anyone I know, like on that scene, like I'll stick around or like go to shows because I'm like such a fan of these comics. Like you just take your stand-up hat off for a little bit and you just get to watch it as a fan. And, you know, we would watch the show, like hang in the back, like watch all these amazing comics starting at like, you know, at that point in their careers where we would see Bill Burr every time he came in, you know, and I remember when he just like got too big to do comedy clubs anymore and it was like depressing. So I'm like, oh, I can't go see him anymore at Helium.
I mean, I see what you mean, but at the same time, I was going to say it was kind of cool. Like you would see
so cool.
Somebody come through town 3 or 4 times. Like, okay, so they'd come to town once or twice and their numbers would get a little better every time. Mm-hmm. Then like they come to town again, all the shows are sold out. They come to Helium a 4th or 5th time, the shows are sold out and they add a show. It was kind of cool to see that with a lot of people over time. And then, you know, from Helium, you know, and comedy clubs in general, if you were to just keep your numbers keep getting better, you know, instead of doing 6 shows with 300 people, you come and you do like 2 shows at like a 1,000 seater.
Right, exactly. Yeah, why do more work? You know, God, I remember like speaking of Boston. I don't know, like Bill Burr keeps coming up on this, but like, he did like 20 shows or something at the Wilbur there, like at this theater. You know, he did like a whole residency, and after that, I think after he did that, it just, and you know, Kevin Hart like would do things like that too, where you know you just think to yourself, you know what, maybe a stadium. You know, maybe I'll do one stadium instead of 20,000 or 20 shows in front of a 2,000 seater.
Now,
you know?
Have you ever done a show at the Wilbur Theater in Boston?
Never did.
Dude, I did it one time, and to this day, I would put that in my top 5 favorite shows of all time. 16 years in comedy.
Amazing. Who were you there with?
Tom Segura.
So cool.
And he was like on the cusp of being famous. Like, I don't know. We still did. We were on like a string of one-nighters that whole week. We did a couple comedy clubs. The shows were sold out. And then we did the Bell House in Brooklyn. That was like 500 people sold out. And then we did the Wilbur, and that was like, I don't know, 1,100 sold out. But the crowd was like, I just remember everything about that show. The crowd was absolutely electric from the second I walked on stage. And we were doing a 2-person show, and I would do like 20 minutes. Like I did close to 30 and didn't even realize.
Amazing.
And Tom didn't even care. He's like, dude, that was fucking awesome. And my parents came up from Philly to watch that show, and they were in the first row of the balcony, and they sat next to Tom Segura's dad.
Uh-huh.
So, but as far as like favorite shows goes, you know, I would put that in my top 5 of all time. So that's my only experience in Boston. The fucking bomb, the other festival show, and then like one of the best nights of my entire life.
Yeah, Pat, you can't go back. No, like that has to be your last show there for sure.
Absolutely. So, okay, now you are very good friends with another Philly comedian, Todd Glass. We're all from the suburbs. How did you get hooked up with him? I know you guys have been tight forever. So what's your backstory with him? Because I love Todd. I want to get him on the podcast. He's been very good to me as well, but I know you guys are super tight.
Yeah, he's great. I mean, like I met him through Helium. You know, like by the way, this sounds like such like an integrated ad for Helium. I swear to God, this is just how we talk on any podcast.
Well, that's what I like, man. And you know what? I've had in the past couple of weeks, I've had numerous people tell me that they love the inside comedy talk. So this is exactly what I mean. This is what I want to talk about. So
me too.
Perfect.
Yeah. I met Todd at Helium. So I had become a fan of Todd's through actually my friend Chris, and he was a big Last Comic Standing fan, and then like we started listening to like, you know, his album of vintage Todd Glass and other crap, and you know, all this other stuff, so which made me laugh. Like, do you remember, oh god, I don't even remember the setup of the bit, but this album I think must have come out like over like 20 years, like, you know, 20 years ago or something, but it was like the joke was like he would sing, he was singing like, I love big titties, baby, I love them, baby. It's just like, I forget what, and we would just say that to each other, like quote him as if, like how people quote Family Guy, like we would quote Todd. And Chip Chantry, another amazing Philly comic, he was hosting. And I met Chip, I think it was at your show at the Draft Horse, right? Was that called the Draft Horse in Temple?
Yes,
at Temple?
I did a couple shows there with a guy named Derek Jones who went on to write for Leno.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Crazy.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And he wasn't even really doing stand-up at the time. He like dabbled in it once or twice, and then years later, he's working for Leno. Crazy.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, unbelievable. That's really cool. So yeah, I met Chip at your show, and then Chip was hosting at Helium, which was like the coolest thing in the entire world to me. And I was like, hey, like, we bought tickets. My dad, my best friend Chris, and I bought tickets to see Todd. And I was like, hey, like we're gonna come see you guys. And Chip was like, oh, Todd's really, really nice. If you want to hang out like after the show, like I can introduce you guys. You can get a picture. And I was like, that's so cool. And then Todd was hanging out before the show when we met him, and he was so nice. And again, my friend and I were like 16, and met Todd before the show. Chip told Todd that I was a comic. He gave us like his contact information. My friend Chris was interested in comedy too. And now he's writing on the show Umbrella Academy on Netflix.
Awesome.
And we like he just gave us his information, and he was so nice afterwards. We got a picture with him. And I would call Todd like once a year after that, maybe to ask for comedy advice, which, speaking of like cringe stuff, like I'm sure at one point, like the question, I'm like, so like, what do you do if you get heckled? Like, I'm sure it was questions like that, to start. And he was always really, really nice. And I would get so nervous for those calls because I was calling like a famous person, and then he would call me back and sometimes leave me these voicemails, which like this is going to sound like a shameless plug in a minute, but I would save the voicemails that he left me because I thought it was so cool that Todd Glass was calling my phone. And we released them like a few years ago. It's called 12 Years of Voicemails from Todd Glass to Blake Wexler, where it's just voicemails Todd has left me over like a decade plus. And we became closer and closer friends. Like when he would come back, like, as I got older, like, we would have more in common, obviously. So we'd hang out, eventually let me do a guest set on one of his shows, which was really cool. And, he would go to, Boston when I was in college, like opening for David Cross or Jim Gaffigan. And, he would give my roommates and I tickets and stuff. And then when I moved to LA, we became really, really close friends. Great guy, great comic. And, when you talk to other comics about Todd, like younger comedians, they all have the same thing to say about him that like you and I do, Pat, where they're like the nicest guy and so supportive of young comics.
Dude, he's been great to me over the years, and he cares so much about everything. Like he gets to the club hours before the show and like, sets the room up so it's more like welcoming. Like I remember seeing him at Helium in Philly move a stack of chairs away from a table. And he goes, he's like, you don't want people to think they're like storage. You don't want people to think they're sitting in a garage. I thought that was so cool that he just like, and he doesn't bother the club with it either. He takes it upon himself to like he sets mood lighting. He'll bring those like color, I don't know what they're called. Things
I know, gels
to put over the light, so like the showroom is either like a nice like hot pink or like blue, like it really sets the tones. But he cares about all the little aspects, and I've always liked that, and I thanked him for that before. I just think it's awesome, the little nuances that you don't think about, but that make the show and the experience that much cooler.
Dude, you're 100% right, and it's always the right thing to do. Where like I've joked where, like I would love to do a tour where I just do the week after Todd. So it's still set up really nice, like at all the clubs that he was at the previous week. And because I remember, I'll like headline every once in a while. And, I've done a club where I was there with Todd and it was the best experience ever. And then I went back myself as a headliner and they took down all the things that he changed. And I'm like, this is a fucking mess, like this is a nightmare. Like what is it's like a boxing, like you just walk into like a street fight with how disorganized and how much worse it was, so you're right. Like he really does make such a like a perfect environment for stand up.
Yeah, you can always tell he's been to town because there's like a floor mat in the bathroom, or like
or a candle, like
candle, yeah. Have you done Jimmy Kimmel's Club in Vegas?
I haven't yet. No,
dude, it's great. It's a great club, great room, great staff, but it has Todd Glass all over it. You can just tell. You can just tell it's awesome.
Yeah, I hear it's really, really nice.
That's awesome though, because it's great. Like, a couple comics have been very, very good to me over the years, but you and Todd have something like really, really, I don't want to say extra special, but you were so young and he took you under his wing. And that's like, that's one of the coolest things you can have happen to you in comedy is like not only somebody to help you, but somebody really go above and beyond. It means so much. And, having somebody to ask questions to, now you were so young, but I mean, it never changes. It's still awesome to just have somebody that you can always look up to and come to if you need something or are curious about something.
Yeah, he's like, I mean, it's funny, like in terms of like the like whatever like success I have had like in this business, like when I moved to LA, it was either because of the people I met at Emerson or like Todd, and it really helped. And he was always fair too, where, he would never, if I wasn't ready to feature or like headline an off night at a comedy club, he wouldn't put that call in, and he would be honest about it. He would be nice about it. He wouldn't be like, well, you suck, you'll never work again. He would be like, hey, like, like maybe you wait, get another year under your belt before, we do this or whatever. And having someone like that, when I moved to LA, where, because it's just so hard to get spots anywhere in the world, like, and when I moved there, like to have him be like, hey, like, would you mind, Todd, like just telling this person, like to like, that I'm funny enough maybe to like to give me 5 minutes at some point in the next few months, like to have that co-signer really, I mean, it basically saved me like 2 years of grinding it out, in rooms where, being the 100th comedian on an open mic list. Like, so yeah, the guy's been, invaluable.
Dude, he's really is one of the best. I got to get him on the podcast. He's on my list.
Yeah, he would do it in a second.
Oh God, I totally know he would. What other comics have been good to you?
Just him, actually. No,
that makes sense.
I mean, so Dan Levy also has been really good to me. He is a stand-up who went to Emerson. He's had an hour special, half-hour special. He created this show on NBC right now, like just a really, really successful, like down to earth guy, where I met him at Emerson where he was doing a show there. And, I like hung out like, cause, he did like a meet and greet or like, not a meet and greet, a Q&A with like Emerson kids. And a lot of their questions were, like kids who had never done stand-up before. Why would you have done stand-up in college? Like that's a thing you start later in your life. But I, like came up to him like, hey, like, I've done like some stand-up for like 4 or 5 years. I started young, and he, like saw me do this showcase like at their big theater there. And he goes, hey, like, stay in touch. You were really funny. And then one day, but he saw me do like one joke, and he let me like open for him at like this College Humor Live tour thing, and at LaSalle, which was really cool in my hometown. It was him, Christian Finnegan, John Mulaney, and that was really cool. And then he gave me my first college gig opening for him, like in front of 1,000 people. It's still like, the
nice.
most people I've performed in front of. So just like a really, and dealt with like, the like a shithead of a college kid just being like, hey, how do I do this? How do I do, like, was always so kind. Like, hey, can I, like, will you look at this TV show I wrote? And it wasn't even a show. It was like, I basically wrote something. Like, I didn't even have character names in the script. It was like person 1, person 2,
oh, God,
like guy with hair. And he was so
outside.
Nice. yes, like exterior, outside, like just had no idea what I was doing. And he was so kind where he could have just been very dismissive, like, oh, here's an annoying person, but was so sweet and like, hey man, you might want to do this, might want to do that. And it was stuff that, like, had I just read something online, like, I could have gotten that answer, but instead I got it from someone who's been very successful in that part of the world. So he's been just incredibly nice to me as well. So yeah, he's been great. And then Cy Amundsen is another one. We were texting about him the other day, but he has that podcast with Chad Daniels, which was a great episode that you had on your show. I love that episode.
Thank you. That was one of my favorites too, man. Chad's so fucking funny. Like, he's one of the comics, like, when people ask me who I think is funny, like, I really think I mention him first.
Yes. I mean, he has to be up there. And he's a guy where, so I met Cy at, when I was in college, like, there was like a college, like, stand-up competition or whatever. And then the top 4 schools, like, get to go to Aspen, to this Aspen Comedy Festival there, the Rooftop Aspen Comedy Festival. And I went 2 years in a row, and I met Cy there one year, and he was super, super nice. And the year before, I had met Chad, and we didn't get a chance to tell this whole story on his podcast. So, like, I'd like to tell it on here, where Chad was like the man, just like the man. He was awesome. So funny, and yeah, he's awesome. He was cool and down to earth. Like, there was no, entertainment Hollywoody bullshit with him. Like, he was just a fun, like, a normal dude. Like, and I mean that as the highest compliment. Just like a great guy you'd want to know. And it was also one of the best comedians I've ever seen. And he was so funny the whole week, where to have a comedy festival in Aspen is one of the worst. It's one of the worst places on earth to have comedy, because it's all in order to be an audience member there, you have to be in the upper 1%, in terms of incomes. So how are we going to relate to you? So, like, as comics. So he had no tolerance the whole time. He was ripping the audience apart, to the point where Cy told me this. They released their sets on Pandora. Rooftop did, as like their festival sets, and every once in a while on Pandora, a set that Chad Daniels did will come on, where there's no joke really. He's just screaming at an Aspen audience, and then it just goes to the next. Then it goes to like Jim Gaffigan talking about Hot Pockets. Like, he's just thrown in there, and he was so upset the whole time and had a little too much to drink one night. And there was this annoying Aspen socialite. She was just so annoying, making everything about her one night. She goes like, I could beat you all up. And Chad just goes, I will arm wrestle you right now. I will arm wrestle you right now. And she goes like, I'll beat you. And he goes, no, you won't. And so everybody's like crowded around, and we all thought Chad would, do the thing where like, oh, you're going to beat me or whatever. And he goes to arm wrestle her and just slams her arm down. Right, not in a violent way, like not in an assault way, but like just did it in a way where like just beat someone in an arm wrestling contest. And it's one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my entire life. Like, it was unbelievable.
I really want to hear that set where he's yelling at the crowd.
Dude, it's somewhere. Like, I think Rooftop may have sold the rights to some of their stand-up to another company, but it is, like, you can find it for sure.
I was going to say, if I can't find it, I'm going to text him and ask, because on my podcast, he mentioned about how he's like a giant baby on stage. Like, he said it himself, and he was talking about, he was bombing at the Montreal Comedy Festival, and there's like hundreds of people in the crowd, all the important industry bigwigs, and he was just fucking losing it on people.
Yeah. It's great. I love seeing that, and doing it in a way where, like, he's funnier than he is mean. You know what I mean? And I think that's the key to taking out an audience like that. Like, put them in their place in the funniest way possible. He's like a master of it.
He is, instead of taking the opposite approach and then just being a complete fucking dickhead to one or two people, where it's like to the point where it's off-putting and the whole crowd turns on you because you are being overly mean. And whether the audience member or heckler or whoever deserved it or not, if you are too quick to really lose it and shame them, like, you could lose the crowd because you look like the asshole.
I know, dude. Yeah, keeping a temper in check is like, that's just one of the most important lessons I think that you can learn.
Speaking of tempers, I've seen Todd Glass lose it a handful of times, haven't you?
Yeah, and I think that he just cares so much.
One time, this was at the Helium Open mic. Now, so for most comedy clubs, you have shows Wednesday or Thursday through Sunday. And
Right.
in Philly at Helium, the open mic was Tuesday, and they had shows with the headliners Wednesday through Saturday. So Todd Glass was in town, and he came in a day early to do the open mic. And
Yeah, which was always really cool.
Oh, it was so fun. And there was a drunk woman, just being a fucking drunk woman. She was mouthy, and Todd Glass starts screaming at her, leaves the mic stand and the mic on the stage, goes to her table, points right in her face and said, "You're the reason Mitch Hedberg is dead." And then I had to follow that set. I went on directly after Todd to a crowd that was just horrified.
You're the reason Mitch Hedberg is dead.
I think about that all the time.
Dude, Todd will say, like, just that improv. He said things. Jesus, that's so funny. Oh my God, you're the reason Mitch Hedberg is dead.
Yep. And like, not only did he say it, like I was sitting in the showroom watching it. I can see him point his finger in her face and say it so adamantly. And then he called her a cake smusher. He's like, this comedy show is cake, and people want to enjoy the cake, and you just come up and you just fucking smush it. You're a cake smusher.
Dude, if that's not a term, a cake smusher is perfect. Dude, he comes up with these words. Like, I remember he was trying to describe a bird flying, and he like couldn't think of the word flying for whatever reason. And he was like, you know what? Like when they jump and stay jumped.
It was the
funniest thing. They jump. You're a cake smusher.
So you just had your third album come out, right?
I did, yeah.
Congrats, man. Number 3. That's awesome. You got a hat trick of albums right there.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't even think it was. I didn't plan on recording it, but I mean, we were kind of texting about this. We're just like, what it's been like during the pandemic for us, and that was my I mean, I did 3, I guess, since March. Like since everything shut down. It's funny, my last show before everything shut down, because LA has just been completely locked down pretty much the whole time. They haven't had
anything there.
No, it's really brutal. I mean, obviously, like things are so bad there, like no one knows what to do. But my last show was in San Diego, and it was great, thank God. So for 6-7 months or whatever, I had a great taste in my mouth, for my last show. And then I came back to Philly, and I had 2 of the outdoor shows at the Punchline, which was really fun. And then I did one at Steel Stacks in Bethlehem outside. And I'm like, you know what? Just do all the material, just do all the material that you haven't done on an album yet. Just all the stuff that I had been working on, talk about the pandemic. And I was going to set up like a camera just to like post a video or something on social media, or, maybe see something that I was doing that I can improve, from rewatching myself. And the guy who runs the place, Ryan Hill, who's awesome, he was like, yeah, he's great. He's really funny himself. And he was like, you don't want to set up a camera. Like, you're outside. What are you going to do? Like, what are you going to get out of this tape? And I'm like, you're right. But I'll just, just in case there was something. And the recording came out so well. And I had never done any of the material before on an album. So I'm like, I'm just going to release this,
That's awesome.
Because, yeah. And it came out, thank you. It came out well, where like, my other albums, there is a pressure of, and it's not a pressure that's like crippling or anything, but it's like, oh, I've, when I produced that first one myself with Alex Dingley, he did one of yours, right?
He did my first one. Yep.
Yeah. Who is great. And I'm like, oh, I'm paying for this out of pocket. And so there's the pressure of, if I don't get this right, that's a lot of money that I kind of don't have, So, and there was only one show, because I was like, I did one show. I couldn't sell out multiple shows at the time. And then my second one I did with a label, and I'm like, they're paying for it, for all these people to come down here to LA. Like, what if if I don't get this, then it's, so what, I do another one, where am I going to do that? And then this one, there was no pressure, because I didn't know I was doing it. So it's super natural, super loose. There's a lot of riffing. So it's called Live from the Pandemic. It was a fun one.
That's awesome. And the thing about pressure, you're totally right. My first album recording was one show, one take. Is like, this is it. So I guess if it sucks, I don't have to use it. But like you said, I'm spending money, so here we go. And the second album, I did 2 nights at Helium so I could mix and match. And then Tuesday really wasn't that great, and Wednesday was phenomenal. So I just went straight up Wednesday. But I'm glad that I had the two options.
I went to one of those and you were incredible. So I forget whether it was your first one or your second one, but yeah, they were great.
Thank you, man. Very much appreciated. So you got 3 now. That's awesome. And I want to get back to the pressure thing. That's awesome. So what a cool surprise for you. Like, you're just doing this headlining set for fun, and then all of a sudden it's like, holy shit, I can actually use this. Like, what a fun surprise for you in a shitty time. Because this year has sucked for all of us, but that gives you something to make you happy with your career at a time where we didn't have shit this year.
Yeah, that's thank you. And like, yeah, it's like heartwarming to hear you say that, because like it's funny, like you know, as a stand-up, like it's hard not to go negative, where I'm like, well, do I deserve this? You know, is this as tight as it should? You know what I mean? Like, but then I thought about just all the stuff that you have to deal with in this career, when things that you have put so much, like, you know, preparation into and work into, and you get it all tight and, like, you know, as great as you can get it, and then like someone says no, or like something gets screwed up, or, you know, like for a variety of reasons things don't work out, and I'm like, oh, you know what, I feel like this great thing is a tax on all the terrible things that happen in this business, or it's like, you know what, I've earned this, I've accrued this credit, this career credit, and I'm gonna cash it in. And I'm really, really happy with it. And like you said, it's been a brutal year, so it's like, oh, I don't know when I'm going to be able to do stand-up again, so at least I kind of, you know, sentimentally have that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So that does make it easier.
Of course, it's definitely something to hang on to, and it's still exciting for a while, you know, because you have people, you know, downloading it or listening to it, and then, like, you know, every couple of days, every couple of weeks, somebody hits you up and it's like, hey, man, I really like the album, so it kind of keeps some momentum going. Do you have any shows on the calendar? Anything live?
0 shows, no shows.
Me too, man. You know what? I was actually just saying this the other day to a couple people. So when the shutdowns began last March, I still had some stuff on the calendar for October and November that remained. So even though you know, it's March and they were like 6, 7, 8 months away, I still had something on the calendar. So I did those shows. Those all went through. I picked up a couple miscellaneous gigs here and there. But right now, dude, first time in 15 years, not a single thing on the calendar. And it is fucking weird.
It's very, very strange. I mean, how great has this been for you, though? You know, like, where it's not the same as stand-up, but like being able to do this podcast and talk stand-up with your friends and people that you respect is, I mean, that has to be like a little bit of a band-aid, right?
Absolutely, man. I'm having a blast doing this because, you know, I've mentioned it on several of my episodes, but talking comedy with comedians is my favorite thing in the world. And when comedians get together, you can spend hours and hours just talking comedy. So this podcast is like a green room chat for me. Like, you know, you and I aren't doing a show together, but here we are talking shop like we were, like as if we were at a comedy club. So that's been awesome.
Yeah, it's so cool. I love it. Yeah.
Anything you want to plug before we wrap up here? I know we just talked about all 3 of your albums, but is there anything else you want people to check out?
Yes. Well, I also have a podcast. It's called Blake's Takes, for God's sakes, and it's just me. I don't have guests on it, and it's not for you. It's not for anybody. But yeah, I have that, you know, the album, and you know, you can get all 3 of those stand-up albums like everywhere, and then also that. We talked a lot about Todd, that album, 12 Years of Voicemails from Todd Glass to Blake Wexler. You can also get that, you know, anywhere too. So get the whole catalog, everybody. Get the Blake Wexler catalog.
Get the box set. All right, one more quick thing. I'm trying to work this into most episodes. Sometimes I remember, sometimes I forget. I love a good horror story. So do you have any any specific time where you bombed so bad, or the show itself was just so bad that you still get the heebie-jeebies when you think about it?
Yes.
Okay, go on.
Oh God. All right. Which one? Yeah. All right. So here's one. I mean, I've had like 1 or 2 where I was just so embarrassingly drunk, where it's like, what are you doing? But I learned from those, so that hasn't happened in a while. But the weirdest
I have a handful of those under my belt as well.
I know. It's I had a video of one. I'm like, oh, this will be fun to release one day. And then I watched it and I'm like, this needs to be deleted or I'm gonna kill myself because this is like the most embarrassing thing.
Real quick, have you ever been so drunk you didn't know you did stand up till the next day?
No.
That happened to me
not
one
that.
time.
Oh my God.
This was years ago out in Delco. I was
Well, if you're gonna do it somewhere.
I know. I was at day drinking with a comic all day.
Mhm.
All day. And the next morning, a buddy of mine, Rob DeSantis, texted me and said, "Hey, man, good set last night. I like the new stuff." And
Oh,
I was
no.
like, I did stand up last night. I had no idea. And apparently, I fucking did new stuff. So what did I do? I had no idea. But yeah, that only happened one time and one time only. I had no idea I did a live set. No.
Imagine if that was the greatest set you've ever done. You know, like it was like you were just this unparalleled level genius. Like in that set, that's what you need. Okay, so here's
yeah. Sorry, I had to I had to tag along with the whole drunk thing because that's my worst drunk story. So go ahead.
No, I wanted to hear that. That's great. Okay, so this is a weird one where it's not like it's not that like this was no one's fault, I guess, except the booker. It also shows like my ignorance and also just a very specifically like uncomfortable situation where I was in college and I got like I was, you do any set that you can do, and this like local booker in Boston was like, hey, like will you do a set at this address or whatever, I just figured it was a bar. So I'm on the subway there and the guy goes, hey, by the way, like don't do any AIDS material. And I mean, you've seen my act. Like I've never done like an AIDS joke in my life. And I'm like,
I love ultra specific instructions.
That's exactly because I am like, oh, okay. Like you could have just said, don't work blue or like work a little clean. Like it's really weird that they said AIDS jokes. And I was like, oh yeah, like, I would never do that anyway, like question mark. And the guy goes, okay, good, because you're performing in an AIDS shelter for people who are terminally ill with AIDS. And I was like, because not that like, by the way, this isn't going to be some like AIDS joke story at all. This is just like of how like I guess I was just shocked to not know what my audience was going to be.
Who the fuck wouldn't be shocked finding out that information?
I know, it's like maybe just bring that up so I can mentally know what's happening, like and so I walk into this place and it's like in a cafeteria and dude, this story is like probably way more sad. This story is not funny at all. It's just very sad. And I'm like, these people were all very sickly and I had to and they're like, I was supposed to do 10 minutes. And the guy goes, hey man, we actually have like bingo night after this. So would you mind just doing 2 minutes? And generally I'm like, I would be like, how dare you cut my time? Like I came all the way here. I'm like, I can do less if you'd like, just because of how, like I'm a sensitive guy. Like it just, I didn't feel very funny that night. You know what I mean? So I did these jokes and like, it ended up going great. Like I did 1.5 minutes and they were like so grateful, but like that's the show. Like, and it was honestly like a really, really ended up being like a positive, sweet, thing. But like, dude, the shock of just that whole shock of the entire thing where I'm like, God, the amount of feelings that you have in that situation of these like poor people that like, or like unfortunate people that were stricken by this awful disease. And like, you just have to smile and be chipper without getting in the right headspace. I got so drunk after that show. Like it was, I don't even know how many days went by that I can remember after that. But yeah, it was, that would be the craziest show I've ever done.
Wow. And you only did 1.5 minutes.
1.5 minutes.
That's and the worst. Like I've done auditions where you do 2 minutes of stand up and like, what the fuck do you even say in 2 minutes? Like,
yes.
Like, because, you want to open, you want to close, and in the middle, you want to sustain. But if you have 90 seconds or 2 minutes, like I always hated that kind of stuff.
Dude, and also, by the way, off what you're saying, like these are one of the, like, sometimes I just love a hacky line or a line that's been done a lot. For short sets, I still laugh when someone goes up for one and says, I'll leave you with this, like right before that set starts. It still makes me laugh.
That's awesome. All right, dude, thank you for being here, man. Great,
dude. Of
great
course, it was so
conversation.
great.
Thank you, man. I hope we can actually physically cross paths in 2021.
We will, for sure.
We'll make that happen, or we'll, if shit starts to reopen in the spring or summer, let's book something together.
Yes, I would love that. That would be so much fun.
Cool, man. Thank you for being here, everybody. Blake Wexler.